Hey, what's going on, boys? Welcome back to another video. If you're watching this on Ko-fi, thanks so much for supporting me. Obviously, you get to see this a little bit sooner. And if you're watching on YouTube and you want to know how to support me, yes, I'm selling out already in the first 5 seconds. You can check out my Ko-fi description below. Anyway, so today's topic of conversation is going to be how to properly prioritize things. This is going to tie into my mechanics video. So if you watch that video, or if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend it. I'll link it below, but you can also search it up on my channel, where I basically talk about tips for being more efficient, playing a little bit faster. This is going to tie into that. You also I guess you don't need to watch that video to do what we talk about today, but I think if you conjoin those two topics together, you'll recognize that you probably play a little bit smoother and a little bit faster. But yeah, so we'll be talking about prioritization. I think I said that right. In general, how to sort of decide when you should be, let's say looking at your base instead of looking at your army, or vice versa. Or if you have maybe an army and a drop, what should you look at first? Should you be looking at your army, or should you be looking at your drop? In general, though, this is something that I think you can take to any video game. You can take this approach to any video game, regardless of the genre. If it's something that, if you're super serious about improving in video games, I think this is something that you could take and apply to all of that. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and get started. So I brought you guys an example TVP that I played. This game actually ends up being like 25 minutes long or something like that. But the reason why I chose this game specifically is because when I get to the late game, I start multitasking very heavily with bio, and I'm playing against disruptors. And so I wanted to use that as an example, as a sort of template, so you could see how I'm prioritizing all these groups of units and in which order, and how you should sort of be thinking about that. And so I'll start from the very beginning, which is when you have like a drop going on, or maybe your push, and with the Raven. So I'm going to send this Raven across. I think I ran into 2 observers there, which is pretty unlucky. And so when we look at my POV here, there's a couple of things you want to think about. The first thing being, there's a lot of things that you can do without needing to look at it. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? When we're talking about macro, right, because that's a big thing. You're microing your units. You're looking at your units, and you're also trying to not sacrifice your macro. And for some people, it's a little bit weird to macro while not looking at, let's say your production buildings. But technically you don't need to, right? Because if you hit your control groups, assuming that you have control groups, which if you don't, that's probably where I would start. If you're looking at if you use your control groups, you could be looking at, let's say, this medevac, and then knowing that I'm looking at this medevac, I could hit 3 on my control group, hit the production cycles, and then still be looking at my medevac without needing to look at my main, right? Inherently, there's going to be certain things that you'll need to look at your main for. For example, adding extra production or adding supply depots. That stuff I'll talk about as we move on. But generally speaking, that's stuff that you add in between actions, right? Then again, how do you decide when's the appropriate time to do that? And that's what I'm going to answer. So here I send a turret, and as you can see there, I dropped the turrets first, and I decide, okay, I'm going to move out now. I'm going to add my third before I leave my base, because right now I'm going to have to, there's a good chance that I'll be running into Blink Stalkers. And if I'm running into Blink Stalkers, I'm going to be focused on defending that first, right? And then if I get too caught up on that, I'm going to delay my third base a couple of seconds, let's say. As I'm moving out, I'm going to make quick adjustments. For example, my rally points, where I'm going to send certain units. So for example, there, I kind of waited on my army, looked back, picked up some units, and then went back on the map. And so here, as I'm kind of moving across the map and I'm not encountering anything, I feel much more comfortable to actually do a lot of the things that I need to do, right? So that's why you see me adding extra depots. That's why you see me starting combat shields, and I'm not necessarily worried. Now here, as I look at this, obviously I'm spamming my groups. I'm shifting widow mines. You'll most likely see me there as I'm checking on my my mineral line saturation, right? Because sometimes it turns red, and then I want to transfer workers. Here I'm going to build more depots. And again, I'm doing this as obviously nothing is happening, and as my army is moving across the map. Okay, now the reason why my mechanics video ties into this is because it's much faster to do all this stuff when you actually have camera locations, when you have control groups, right? Because I don't waste time scrolling. And overall, my movement is very efficient, and that saves me time Okay, there, look at my starport to build Vikings. Again, I technically didn't have to do that, right? I don't have to do that. And you see here, I started one Viking and then I needed to add another Viking, but I did that while looking at my army. Okay. And so I'm sort of finding a balance between, you know, yes, if I need to add buildings, I will do that as my army is in a safe position. And then for other things, if I need to build units, I can do that while moving my army towards the position I want to move it towards. Okay. There, I scan. Okay. Notice that his army is a bit of a distance away. And also notice that I realized quickly that I want to get ghosts, right? Seeing a lot of sentries there. Ghosts are going to be really good for me. So if we rewind here, look how quickly I'm able to do it. All right, just I hit my camera location, I grab a worker, I build the Ghost Academy, and then I go back to my army. Okay, right here, I see, oh, that's a lot of that's a lot of sentries. Bam. And then I look back, I check my units, and I land my third. Because I know here, okay, he's got a fourth coming up. I need to take my third. But because I moved my army away from his, I know that it's okay to do that, right? And so that's why I'm prioritizing that instead. Now that I've move my army closer to his army, that's where I start paying more attention to my army movement. And now this is where you're going to see me focus much more on that. I'm going to send this drop. And then, for example, in between this drop, in between you boosting the medevacs and then you actually landing the units, this could be another scenario where you quickly hit your F1 key, your F2 key, and you build those supply depots, let's say. And so here I boost in. Obviously, I'm very focused on this. I'm going to hit my control groups right there. I build some units. Again, I can do this all without needing to look at the bases, right? I know how I need the orbital. Technically, I could have built the orbital there without looking at it, right? But I fixed my mineral line there. Why did I fix my mineral line there? I knew that I was building it. I knew that I landed my third, and I knew that I needed to start building SCVs to rally them to my third. I saw his army was away from me, so this is where I can take that opportunity to make a very quick adjustment because... And this is a whole conversation in and of itself, or a whole topic of conversation. But basically, a lot of times when we focus on these kind of big drops, these kinds of big pushes, we slow down our transition into the mid game. And it is extremely important that I still take a third right now, because even if I do a lot of damage, I might not be doing enough to offset the fact that I'm not transitioning to the best of my ability. Does that make sense? So, and it becomes a ROI sort of thing, right? Something in the great words of the Patty Mac, you know, when you're looking at certain things and you're doing certain things, how worth it is it? How worth is that action, right? In terms of like, could you be doing something else that could make you, I don't know, let's say like improve your income in this game or improve your macro or your position in this game compared to just staring at this drop. Hopefully that made sense. I didn't butcher that explanation. Here I boost away. I'm still building units. Okay, right here I'm making sure that my units are safe and sound. As soon as I know my units are safe and sound, because I saw his army in his main, what do? Bam, hit the control group, quickly transfer workers. I know that I need to transfer workers to take my third. Okay. Now, obviously, there's an order of operations to things, right? For example, in this case, the number one priority was to just get workers to my third. I'm already building units, so I don't need to shift priority to building units, right? Assuming that I wasn't building units, I would have honestly first built units and then transferred my workers. But because if you're good, you're already building units without needing to look at your barracks, then you can do these kinds of things. And so here I move my army away from the enemy, and I'm able to do all these things. So once I get my economy going, and I'm like making sure that I'm not bottlenecking myself by not improving my economic position in this game, that's when I'm going to decide to start moving my units from my rally point, let's say, maybe including more spotters or something like this. I think that kind of stuff becomes secondary relative to your macro and the units you're building and all that good jazz. Again, here, I'm being active with my army, but I'm not being too active, or I'm being too aggressive, rather, because I know there's a lot of things I need to do right now that I need to build, and I don't want to be having to do all that and then on top of that do that. And so here, look how aggressive he's been with his army movement. Had I been, you know, in the middle of the map focusing on other things, I would have cooked myself, right? And so pulling your army back when you're doing these kinds of things will actually be extremely helpful, so you don't just die for the randomest thing. As you can see here, I basically have everything down, right? And so this is where you start having, I suppose, like extra time, right? I have a good economy. I have pretty much 3 base saturation, right? Nearly. I'm like 5 workers away, 3 workers away. I started my armory. I started my eBay. I'm building Vikings. I'm building Ghosts, right? So what do I do now? Okay, well, that's when I was like, okay, well, I have clearly enough time to send that Raven to drop turrets. I'm gonna go ahead and do that first because that's what I think is best. And so that's what I did, right? And I can do that comfortably without needing to worry about anything. Now here I have to focus on the fight. And so when we're looking at this, let's look at a couple of things here. There's a big run by in my zealot run by my natural, and there's also this big fight going on. Okay. Unfortunately, though, this big fight is probably going to be more important than the mineral line in my natural. Unfortunately, right? So if, for example, there were disruptors here, or in this case, even with the Colossus, right, there's a lot of splash damage, I really can't afford to not look at this, right? However, I recognize here very quickly that I'm actually getting a decent trade because this is a choke point. I'm not running towards it, clearly. I have way too many Marines, by the way. But my Vikings are actually killing Colossus, which is good. And I don't need to chase this because I know that this is a problem. So what do I do? Well, like I said earlier, we're going to focus on this, but if I notice him pull away, I can also pull away and then hit my natural camera location and shift units down here. So look at my POV, I see, okay, he force fielded my army out. I know that I pushed him out. Obviously I'm F2ing, and it's okay to F2 in this situation because obviously something huge is happening. And then I've cleaned that up, right? And then here it is happening. Now I'm like, okay, what do I do? Well, notice quickly, I recognize that his army could be anywhere out here, right? And so as of this moment, because his army isn't here, I know that I can afford to shift some Marines, and I can take the time to shift those there, and that's what I do. So now I move my SCVs. And in general, by the way, when you're dealing with harassment, there's 2 steps you want to do. The first thing you want to do is actually send the units there, and then the next thing you want to do is mineral walk the SCVs away, right? And so I quickly sent the army, and then I use my camera locations again, and then shifted my workers away. Okay, and that's how I would focus on that. Now that I have the actual units there, I can quickly shift back to prioritizing this and trying to take the best that I can. Or at the very least, delay a full-on engagement for as long as possible. I cleaned up most of the zealots there. At that point, it was only 1 zealot. There's not too much to worry about. I didn't get a shift now to make sure I don't die. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on. But I do this fight here, and I end up winning the fight. I quickly check to see what the zealots are doing. Notice again, I do that. Sorry, this is probably so loud. I do that as soon as I actually realize that I'm winning the fight. So once I realize I'm winning the fight, I can afford to look away and deal with all the extra stuff. Now, obviously, I'm extremely behind. None of this is great, okay? But the point being is, if I lose this fight, trying to also deal with the zealots at the same time, and I do a poor job of doing both things, I lose either way. Like, I'm definitively dead. But here, because I actually killed his army, and every unit that he warps in to harass me is army that he's not going to have at home. And so because of that, I'm actually able to still hold on, because this is pretty much his whole army, right? Until he gets another warp in, until more robos come out. He has 7 gateways. He's taking a 5th, but he's probably going to need more. But I actually have an army at this point, right? I'm still producing units. Okay, that's another thing. Whenever you can, you know, keep producing workers, keep producing units in the process of everything. And so now it's like, what do I do? Okay. So now at this point, obviously I'm going to macro. I'm going to send some harassment because I need to catch up. That's not really a big part about of this game. So I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit. Sorry if I break your brain, but I wanted to sort of get to the part where I start juggling multiple groups of harassment. Okay, here, perfect. Okay, so now this is where the multitasking really picks up. We have the turrets from the Raven. I have a 3 medevac drop in a corner. Sorry, there might be 4 medevac, well, an empty medevac, but 3 medevacs. The Viking is there for warp prisms, and then I have my main army. Okay. And so here I see, okay, his main army is right here. perfect. I'm gonna try to zone him out, maybe eliminate some vision. I pull my, notice I instinctively move my army away as I look to take my fourth. I don't send that drop in the corner because his army is literally sitting right there. And so why would I drop where his army is, right? That defeats the purpose entirely. So we're not gonna do that. Now here I go back to taking vision once I've been comfortable enough to set up my eco, and then looking at where his army is with the scans, I decide to drop. Okay, so I send the drop in, and I'm now looking because I don't see him recalling this main army. I don't think that there's anything to worry about, right? There might be like an off chance, and this is gonna happen, and I'm not gonna deny it doesn't happen to me either, where coincidentally as I drop there's a disruptor that just walks by. And so even though that happens, okay, like statistically speaking, that's probably not as likely to happen, right? And so I don't want to be in a position where I look at this instead of this, because at the end of the day, this is my main army, right? This is what's going to keep me alive. And I might still be able to hold on even if I lose this, but I can definitely not hold on if I lose this, okay? And that's what you have to think about. So now I see the recall. I'm going to kill this boss disruptor and this other disruptor. Again, I'm not worried about it because I know right here the recall just finished. Right, I did eat a disruptor shot. The recall just finished this, and so now I look at here, because even when you recall, right, there's a period of time where the units can't engage you, right? So if we speed through here, activates the recall, then the recall comes in, but the units can't immediately fight you. And so that's why even though I saw the recall get initiated, I stayed to look at this. Okay, now obviously there's other things you have to take into account, right? Like you have to be able to judge engagements and stuff like that. That's not something that we're really talking about today. Maybe that's a good topic for another video. But I knew that my army was good against the army that he has, as long as I do not eat the disruptor shots, right? I know, very easy to do. But here, I'm in a good spot. Ate a little disruptor shot there, and then here. And notice, none of this is perfect for me, right? I'm still losing units in the process of doing anything, but I've gained momentum, and I've been able to split him up, force him to split up units that are very, very expensive, and that trade poorly against Fire if they don't connect at the disruptors, right? Right here, I gotta pick up my units and move these away, and so then here it becomes a little bit scary, right? I gotta move my army back. So as my army is moving away, I know that I can send this drop back and right, because I'm just retreating with this. I move command back to my fourth, where there's going to be a planetary and on top of a ramp. I know it's a very good position for me defensively, and so why not shift back to this, because he's not there and he already used recall, so I can shift my priority to this. And then as I send that drop home, now I can send this army to the other side of the map, and then in the process of my army moving across the map, it's, look at that, I add the extra gases, I repopulate some of my refineries. You know, I can shift to the Liberator or something like this. Yeah. And then obviously scans are going to help. Great. Don't tell Reddit though. These scans are a free map hack. And then here I come in again. As my drop comes in there, I know a couple of things, right? Like we talked about in the very first example, no recall, right? No recall. And I know his army is not located anywhere near my army, right? Again, sure, there might be a small chance that a disruptor waltz up there, right? But again, statistically speaking, that's not likely, right? It's not going to happen all the time. And so I'm going to take my chance, and I'm going to go ahead and look away real quick to do whatever it is I need to do. Maybe build more depots, maybe build more barracks, and then go back to that. Then I look at my drop, right? During this moment of like, look, I'm just staring at this, right? Like, I literally don't know what to do here. I EMP my gateways, just to kill him faster, because I can't use the drop because it's stuck. I'm already maxed out, right? I decided to move this army to start engaging here, as you can see. And like I said, I'm able to do all that because simply nothing is happening here. So I quickly look. I see his army's approaching, but I take the time. Okay, I know I have 2-3 seconds. I can do something else, and then I can handle that. So basically, not to just fucking keep repeating everything I'm saying for the next 10 minutes. That's pretty much entirely what I wanted to talk about. Again, there's going to be other things, right? Like, yes, of course, I'm fucking 400 APM, man. Oh, I'm actually playing less than 400 APM. So when I do this kind of stuff, it's going to be way faster. But if you're wondering how you can do it. This is the correct way of doing it. Okay, this is the correct way of doing it. And if you have appropriate mechanics, as in like you have camera locations, you have at least 2 army control groups, you can definitely play similar to this or at this level as well. But if you don't have that first mechanical stuff, then you're not set up for this. Okay, and that would be the first step. And that's why I mentioned earlier that if before you watch this, I would advise that you watch that mechanics video if you want to improve with this. Again, taking this thought process is going to help you in other games too. It doesn't have to be just Starcraft. Knowing what to look at, when to look at it, and things that you can do while not looking at it. Okay. All right, boys. That's it for today's video. Hope you guys found that very helpful. I've been uploading a lot of like meme highlights and stuff. So hopefully something that actually is useful. Again, I would appreciate if you hit the like button, if you subscribe. And again, check out my Ko-fi. It's in the description below. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.